but I'm gonna speak on the perspective of why it's like that. You see what I'm saying? Far as Africans being murdered anywhere, this whole live is about military police brutality on Africans globally. This is why, because you posted that comment, is the exact reason why I'm doing this live. You feel me? So don't come on the post, you feel me, on the live early, you know what I'm saying, complaining about what new Africans, misnomer African Americans, ain't speaking on police, governmental terrorism in other countries when new Africans, misnomer African Americans in America been getting genocided for over 400 to 500 years and were kidnapped from their homeland, and the homeland hasn't came to the rescue of these new Africans and blacks in America yet. So we don't want to get back in that. We're not going to do that counterproductive, you see what I'm saying, talk on this live right now. You feel me? I'm not going to indulge in that right now, my brother, because you have new Africans, misnomer African Americans in America, speaking on the behalf of what's going on in Nigeria. I'm one of those individuals. And there's plenty more individuals that live here in North America that do speak up for what's going on inside Africa and the military oppression, the military police oppression on Africans in Africa. Yes, it has been a movement here for decades speaking on that behalf. You may not have seen it, but it exists. So I'm not going to really get into that counterproductive energy right now saying that what new Africans or black Americans or what we're saying, you see what I'm saying, about what's going on over there when we've been speaking on that shit for over damn near 50 years. You see what I'm saying? I think okay, let me retract the energy. Let me take the energy back. Brother and sisters, in order to overstand Africans overstanding, you see what I'm saying, military, police, oppression, no matter where it be on the globe, you have to have a historical, you see what I'm saying? You have to go through a historical self-development in order to understand what's going on in the world. Unfortunately, many Africans, no matter where they be, whether it's the African diaspora or on the African continent, hasn't went through that historical self-development to understand others' oppression and brutal genocide. So let's put that out there. You have to go through a total transformation and a total period of self-development in order to understand oppression. Period. This shit don't fall out the sky, people. This ain't something you expect people to get overnight. For other Africans to understand other Africans' brutal genocides and brutal oppression, you have to go through a period of historical development. Mentally, meaning you have to study geographic politics, period. And many, unfortunately, as the struggle continues every day for Africans on the continent and Africans in the diaspora, many Africans don't have time to do that, brother. So you can't say or point to a majority of a people who haven't went through this stage of developing themselves to understand the material world and the material oppression of Africans by military governments, military dictatorship, and military police dictatorship. You can't expect normal, everyday struggling people in the majority, the proletarian, the working class, to understand something that they don't really have time to understand when they have to survive, brother. So don't point the finger at a majority of people, you see what I'm saying, no matter where they be, Africans, no matter where they be, don't point the finger and say, oh, why these brothers and sisters not speaking up for police terrorism? Or why these Africans are not speaking up for police terrorism? Brother, there's a constant struggle 24 hours in a day, 365. Unfortunately, there's a minority of us who can balance the scales to study the struggle, brother. So don't get upset. And I'm begging all Africans across the world, don't get upset if you think that other African brothers and sisters are not speaking up for your oppression, because number one, that's not true. Because there's movements all across the globe, African movements all across the globe that's speaking up about each other's oppression. I just was on the Garvey conference the day before yesterday in solidarity with Pan-Africans all across the world, in the African diaspora and on the continent. And we were talking about this same thing the day before yesterday on the Marcus Garvey 100 Centennial of the RBG flag about Africans uniting, umoja, and speaking upon each other's oppression. I just was on an international conference speaking about the same thing. So we're not going to start this live off with that type of energy. You feel me? Because this is why I made this live. This is why I wanted to come on to talk about military police terrorism in a broader scope. Because there's a broader scope to this shit. Period. It's a broader scope to this shit. And I wanted to speak on it. But first, let me send salutations to the family of George Floyd. If you're living on another planet right now, another new African, unarmed new African in the empire of the United States of America was assassinated the day before yesterday, a couple of days ago, by state-sponsored white police terrorists. Yesterday. I'm not really going to get into the specifics because at the end of the day, if you're on social media, we're in a pandemic, you're seeing the news, so I don't really have to break down that whole thing. You've seen the video of what happened to our dear brother that was assassinated, so I don't have to get into the details of that. You feel me? But what I will say is this. We have to look at this from an international, broader scope of state-sponsored police terrorism, whether it's white state-sponsored police terrorism or whether it's black police-sponsored terrorism. Because you got to understand these realities. Police terrorism is going on all over the globe. African brothers and sisters on the continent, you know I speak on this constantly. I know what's going on in Africa. Even right now with the pandemic, there's military police terrorism going on the African continent, in South Africa, in Nigeria, in Cameroon. I know these things. I speak on this shit. So my thing is this. We're going to have to look at this from a broader scope in the African diaspora and on the African continent, period, in order to move forward with solutions. And that's why I'm doing this live. I want to talk about what's the end game, what's the solutions to military dictatorship, police, state-sponsored terrorism, period. This is why I'm doing this live. First off, this is the first thing we have to understand. Scientifically, period, is that we have to understand that we don't have a overall global African, how can I put it? We don't have a global overall African type of, and I don't even like to compare this shit to this because they're not doing anything either. But I have to state facts in order to, you know what I'm saying? I have to state solutions or something we can look at scientifically that needs to take place in order to stop this police terrorism on new Africans in America, on new Africans in the African diaspora, and on the continent of Africa. Stopping police military genocide in these countries that's African or white, European, one of the two, is that overall, scientifically, we don't have a body, we don't have a governing body, international, that's on the lies of a global tribal court or a global organization for Africans that will come in on the behalf of Africans being genocided, murdered, and oppression. That's why everything is continuing today on all continents where Africans are being murdered and genocided by police. Now, the organization or the tribal court or anything that I'm speaking of is something in comparison to the United Nations. But we know the United Nations is bullshit. Period. That's controlled by the ruling class. That's controlled by the global oligarchy. So we don't have no faith or no trust in the UN. The United Nations doesn't step in on police terrorism. Period. Or military police terrorism on the continent of Africa. So what I'm saying to you is one solution that we have not reached yet. We're nowhere near. We haven't reached it yet. We haven't even organized nothing on that level. And I'm going to get to who you think I'm talking about right now. But I'm saying, overall, globally, we don't have a legit global tribal court or organization or a committee or a union or a United Nations that's strictly African. We need a United Nations that's strictly African, that indulges in all African affairs, no matter where Africans be globally, specifically pertaining to our genocides, military genocides, or police genocides by state-sponsored governments. Period. Are you listening to me? Are you understanding what I'm saying? I know many of you thinking right now, well, don't we have the African Union? Yes, we have the African Union, but the African Union is no better than the United Nations. They do nothing. They do nothing. What's the sense of having an African Union that doesn't have a power, that doesn't have power to hold other European nations accountable for the genocides and the murder of Africans globally? Period. Are you understanding what I'm saying? What's the sense of having an African Union? Because I seen this online yesterday with some brothers and sisters that were dialoguing about this. What if there was an African organization or an African Union that truly worked on the behalf of African nations and African peoples globally that could come in and intervene on police terrorism, military terrorism on citizens of African people? None exists, because all of them are working on behalf of the global oligarchy, or they're scared of the global oligarchy, or they're in the back pocket of the European global elitists and global oligarchy. You see what I'm saying? So this is why the African Union truly has no respect amongst global Africans, because the African Union does nothing for African oppression. Nothing. All they do is send out sympathizing statements. But there's no action against European nations or European governments when Africans are being exterminated. When Africans are being exterminated by these neo-colonialist governments or these European dictatorship governments. There's no African global organization that's active today that intervenes on global African affairs. That's the issue, brothers and sisters. That's the issue. This is why you continue to die. Let's put it all in the real reality material scope. This is why you continue to die by the hands of your governments. Because we don't have a solidified, unified African global organization, court, committee, tribal courts, or whatever you want to label it. We don't have one. The African Union don't count. Because shit, at one time the African Union said Haiti wasn't even an African nation. They kept Haiti out of the African Union. You see what I'm saying? So my point is this, brothers and sisters, is the fact that we can't be pointing the fingers at the oppressed. We can't point the fingers at each other on why each other is not speaking up. Because brothers and sisters, the global Europeans, nations, they have this in place. They have this type of system in place. And even some of that is crooked to a certain degree, because we know that these Europeans don't come to the aid to mostly of their own European affairs when they're slaughtering and genociding each other also. But what I'm saying is that until Africans get their own global African organization that intervenes on police terrorism, we will continue to die. Period. And at the end of the day, like I keep telling people, and I'm going to keep telling people this, Africa doesn't have an army. Africa has armies, but Africa doesn't have a global army, like i.e. the United States of America, France, all these European nations, you feel me? When they come together and form NATO, NATO is a global army. NATO is a global army that works in the interest of European nations. Where is the African global army to stop police terrorism? Show me. Where is the global African army that intervenes on the behalf of Africans being exterminated by other governments, specifically European nations, the United States of America? Where is this? Where is the existence of this at this moment in time in 2020? There's no way that we have a homeland. We have the greatest homeland on earth. Africa is the greatest homeland on earth, but Africa don't have the global structure to intervene in African affairs, African political, social, economic affairs. That is an atrocity to African people globally. That is an atrocity to have the greatest homeland in the existence of civilizations, period. And we don't have no one to come to our aid or to protect Africans globally. That is an atrocity. Where's the African army? Where's the global African army? Because at the end of the day, who do we call on? Listen to me, brothers and sisters. Who do we call on? Because the black race is the only race. Who do we call on when we need other governments to be sanctioned? Like America. When America is committing police terrorism on new Africans, misnomer African Americans every day, like George Floyd, unarmed Africans getting murdered every day, like George Floyd, who do the new Africans, misnomer African Americans can call on globally to sanction the United States of America for the atrocities, the genocide, and the murder of blacks? Who do we have to call on to sanction the United States of America? Who sanctions the bully? Africans, look in America. Ask yourself the question, Africans, in America, global Africans, get up in the morning and look in America and ask yourself, who do Africans globally have to call on to sanction the United States of America and other European nations when they commit genocide, murder of African people, no matter where they be globally? Who do we call on? That's the issue. That's the problem. Because we have no global organization as African people to call on to sanction America. But America can sanction every other country on this earth when they feel like that country is out of order. What's wrong with that picture, Africa? Africa, look in the mirror, Africa. What's wrong with that picture? Why can't Africa be called on to sanction other global nations when they're murdering their sons and daughters? Why Africa? Why Africa? In the 100th centennial of the red, black, and green flag of Marcus Garvey in the UNIA, the 100th year that we have held the flag high. The flag was put into existence in 1920 as a global African government. Why don't Africa have the power to sanction other countries when their sons and daughters are being murdered everywhere on the goddamn globe? Why Africa? And this is not no blame game. No, this is brothers and sisters having a dialogue, holding our mama accountable for what's happening to their daughters and sons across the globe. Africa has to look in the mirror. Period. Africa, you can... Africa, you control everything, brothers and sisters. Mama Africa, you control everything. You have the resources. You have the minerals. You have everything that the earth is basically surviving off, that these European nations are surviving off. Why can't you cut them off when they murder your sons and daughters? Why Africa? Why you can't cut these European nations off when they murder your children globally? Why Africa? Africa, why you can't stop the murder and genocide of your own sons and daughters on the continent? Africa, we holding you accountable, Africa. You have sons and daughters being military murdered in genocide in Nigeria, South Africa, Cameroon, in the African diaspora, in the United States of America. New Africans being genocided. Why you can't help us, Mama Africa? Why? Why you can't sanction America, Africa? Why? The greatest continent on this earth, the greatest continent that provides for all nations on this planet, can't sanction other governments when their children are being murdered. That's hypocrisy. Like Baba Malcolm X said, that is hypocrisy. That is the biggest contradiction in the world today. Because you want to know why? You want to know why? Africa is still colonized. It's still controlled by these dictatorship European governments, period. And like the great Marcus Garvey said, no African on this globe will ever be free if Africa ain't free to control their affairs in this world. Kwame Nkrumah. What happened to the Kwame Nkrumah doctrine? Kwame Nkrumah stated back in 1960-something that it was a new African in the world, a new man, a new woman in the world that could handle his own affairs globally. It seems that we have failed Kwame Nkrumah. Africa has failed Kwame Nkrumah. I'm not going to blame the oppressed people. We're not at fault. We're not at fault. We're just trying to survive in this world as black men, black women, African men, African women. But why, Africa, have you let down Kwame Nkrumah's vision? Why? We're not handling our own affairs. Because if we was handling our own affairs like Kwame Nkrumah stated so elegantly, no African black man, woman, or child will be getting murdered by military police or police state-sponsored terrorism. Period. We're not doing no pointing the fingers on our own brothers and sisters on why we're not speaking up for this and that and the third. Brothers and sisters, all Africans are being attacked all over the globe. On the broader scope, we're being attacked all over the globe. Everywhere oppressed Africans live, they are dying. Period. Period. We're letting down Kwame Nkrumah. We're letting that. Now, let me take that back because I'm not gonna blame oppressed people. Africa is letting down Kwame Nkrumah. Africa is letting down Patrice Lumumba. Africa is letting down Thomas Sankara. Africa is letting down Amilcar Cabral. Africa is letting down Samora Machel. Africa is letting down Winnie Mandela. Our ancestors are in the grave. Africa is letting down El Hajj Malik Shabazz, a.k.a. Malcolm X. Africa is letting down every leader that took a bullet for Africa. Africa is letting down every great African freedom fighter that took a bullet that was assassinated on behalf of global Africans. Come on, Africa. Come on, Africa. And it's a damn shame that you only have like a handful of African freedom fighters left on the continent that's speaking on behalf of global Africans. You can count them on your hand. You can count them on your hand. And even in the African diaspora, you can only count them on your hand. African leaders that are trying to hold these beasts accountable and hold Africa accountable for not coming to the aid of Africans globally. It's time for us to look in the mirror. It's time for Africa to look in the mirror. Why Africa is not coming to the aid of its sons and daughters. This is the call to Africa. This is the call to Africa. Africa, you must come save your sons and daughters immediately, ASAP, no matter where they're being murdered at. by police or military dictatorship. Come to the aid, Africa. Stop being sellouts, Africa. Come to the aid of your brothers and sisters. We are dying everywhere. We are being murdered by the same people that took your ancestors and my ancestors away from the continent. We are being murdered by the same people, the same system, the same beast. Since the days they took our brothers and sisters out of West Africa and brought them to the hells of North America and the hells of the Western African diaspora. We're being murdered. Knees in the neck, knees in the throat, can't breathe every day here in the hells of the empire of North America. Now, I hope this is a reality check. Listen to me, brothers and sisters. I hope this is a reality check for all those colonized Africans that live outside of the United States of America, that America ain't a friend of African people. America has never been your friend. So all you Africans that live outside of Africa that glorify the United States of America, look at America right now in the midst of a pandemic. In the midst of a pandemic, they're still murdering and killing your brothers and sisters, Africans in Africa. The white man still murdering your brothers and sisters in America. So now do you see America as glorious? Now do you see America as the greatest continent that you want to come to? You come here, you might die. Amadou Diallo was a Somalian from Somalia. What happened to Amadou Diallo in the late 90s? Shot 41 times by state-sponsored police terrorists. So don't think you can come to America and think you got it good. Because when you come here, they only see one thing, African brothers and sisters. A black man or a black woman or a black child, they can kill. They can lynch. Like this sister on this shirt, Laura Nelson. Laura Nelson. Back in 1911. This is 1911 on this shirt. Look at that sister. Her and her son lynched, murdered, private parts cut off for being black, being African in America. This sister was lynched in this month, in May 1911, 100-something years ago, by the same beast that's still murdering your brothers and sisters on this continent right now. Feel me? So all you Africans that live outside of Africa that thinks America is so glorious, it's a paradise, now you see it's not a paradise. Now you see that it's not a paradise. So what we calling on in this 100th centennial of that red, black, and green flag that a lot of African nations have in their flag today, you need to hold Africa accountable. You need to call out Africa. Don't call out your brothers and sisters in the diaspora that's being murdered and genocided to speak on your behalf. No, you have to call out your own homeland. You have to call out Africa. They are the problem. And I'm not talking about African people. I'm not talking about African citizens. I'm talking about the global political system of Africa. You need to call it out, Africans in Africa, on why they don't help our people nowhere on this planet. Africa don't help no black people on this planet from being murdered or genocided. Period. Period. And you new Africans, misnomer African Americans in America, how do you see the United States of America today in 2020? How do you see it? Africans born in America, slave land America. How do you see America today? They murdering you. So are you still going to participate in their political system, or do you want to separate from their political system? I'm calling you out too, new Africans, aka misnomer African Americans. What are you going to do now? What are you going to do now? Are you going to still participate in a system that politically assassinates its nationals? Are you going to continue to participate in a system that murders your children, your sons, your daughters, your brothers, your uncles, your fathers? Are you going to still participate in their political system? Are you still going to vote in November? No new African, aka misnomer African American, should not be participating in no election. We shouldn't be voting for no one in November. The only thing that Africans in America should be voting for in November is a separate new African government, a separate new African territory, a separate new African land of our own. That's the only struggle. That's the only solution is separation. Separation is essential, aka Gaidi Obadeli. Separation is essential. The time is now to seize the time. Oh, it's so ripened. It's so ripened. Everything is ripe for the taking, Africans. Everything is, so ripe for new Africans to free the land and to free themselves right now. There should be no discussions about participating in a political system that just murdered your brother George Floyd on national TV in a ritualistic national assassination. We should not be participating in none of their political systems or political objectives, period. None. We shouldn't be voting for no president. We shouldn't be voting for no president when they still owe Africans, new Africans, millions and trillions of dollars of reparations for the genocide that continues today here in 2020. It's either reparations, land, or die. Let me repeat that. It's either land, reparations, or die. You choose sides, Africans. You choose sides. I know what side I'm on. I've been chose my destiny. Is it the only thing I want for my people is land, reparations, or death? Which one is it? Which one is it? You're not a United States citizen. You're not even seen as a human in America. African Americans, you're not even seen as a human. You're 3/5 in the Constitution. So it's now time for us to take back our destiny. It's our destiny now, brothers and sisters. Or, we already know this. That's why I ain't gonna get into it. I ain't gonna keep repeating it. There will be another George Floyd tomorrow. There will be another Breonna Taylor tomorrow. There will be another black African, new African dead tomorrow and the next day, until we stand up for ourselves and demand political power, political freedom, political sovereignty, political land of our own. Period. There is nothing else to dialogue about. There's nothing else to motherfucking argue over. If you oppress people, your only struggle is for total independence. Period. Period. Like the great barber El Malik Shabazz stated so elegantly, that's not a chip on our shoulder. That's a foot on our neck. That's not a chip on our shoulder. That's a foot on our neck. Omar Wally, Malcolm X, El Malik Shabazz, get the foot off your neck. And the only way you can get this white man foot off your neck is to separate. We've been given the instructions. How long we gonna play these games? How long we gonna play these games with these racists? How long you gonna play these games with these racists, man? When we been got the instructions for some of the greatest leaders ever. Noble Drew Ali, Elijah Muhammad, Marcus Garvey, Tunis G. Campbell. The list goes on. Martin Delaney, Benjamin Pap Singleton, Edwin McCavey. They been gave us the instructions. Malcolm X, the Obadeli brothers, Queen Mother Moore. Ben gave us the instructions, people. We got the instructions. It's our time to adhere to the instructions for black liberation, because reform ain't black liberation. Reforming a system is putting a Band-Aid on the oppressive system. We don't want reform. We want black liberation for black bodies. Period. That's the only solution. Black liberation for black bodies, no matter where black bodies live on this continent or this planet. Period. And before I get off here, let me just touch on this real quick. To all the brothers and sisters who always jumping on social media talking about why they tearing up their own property. Why do black people always tear up their own communities when a brother and sister is murdered by a white racist? Here's my rebuttal to that. Here's my rebuttal to that. Where in the United States of America do new Africans, misnomer African Americans, own anything? We don't own those buildings. We don't own those houses. We don't own that land. That's not our property. So you silly Negroes and you silly Negroes who get on social media every time black people tear up a town when their brothers and sisters get murdered and genocided, you need to shut the hell up. Because you're ignorant. We don't own none of that property. So it's your duty. It's your duty for the voiceless to burn that shit down. It's not yours. You don't own it. You don't own it. The people who oppress you own it. The people that kill your children every day own that property. It's our, don't get me wrong, we live in those communities. We just live there. We don't have no little Africas. We don't have no little Africas like Tupac said. We don't have no little Africas. All we have is ghettos. And that's not even ours. We don't have no little Africas. Tupac Shakur. We don't have no little Africas. So why get upset with your brothers and sisters when they tear up property that's not theirs? Riots are the unheard language of the oppressed peoples. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. You have to voice your frustrations against the oppressor. And this is another rebuttal to the Africans that live outside of America that I see continually on a daily on my timelines saying that why don't new Africans, why don't black Americans go out and kill the people that's killing them? If it's that easy, why aren't you in your own country, on your own continent, killing the people who killing you? Let's think logically, Africans. Why aren't you killing the people that's killing you on the African continent? Since you want to try to blame new Africans and blacks in America on why we're not killing the people who killing our people, why aren't you killing the people on your continent? Come on, man, think logically. We don't need counterproductive energy, period. We're all dying. We're all falling victim to our oppressors, Africans. There's no time to play the blame game. The blame game is over with. The blame game is over with. Burn that shit down. Africans on the continent, when y'all get fed up, y'all burn that shit down. So don't be contradictory when it comes to the scientific methods of rebellion. There's scientific methods to rebellion. Burn that shit down. Burn it down. Burn that motherfucker all the way down. That's not our property. That's not our land. That's not our government. So Africans, you are very reactionary and you're very hypocritical when you try to blame new Africans or black Americans on why are we not killing the oppressor? Why aren't we killing the police? No, we're going to burn this motherfucker down. Period. That's the language of rebellion. Burn that bitch down. You don't own it. Black people don't own shit in America. Period. And you got to understand, when it comes to scientific methods of rebellion, there's a divine time and a divine moment when we shoot back, i.e. the Black Liberation Army struggle. If you Africans outside of America want to know about Africans fighting back against police terrorists, research the Black Liberation Army. Long live the Black Liberation Army. They shot back. They fought back. They're in prison. They're dead for defending new African black people in America. The Black Liberation Army is my bloodline. The Black Liberation Army is our bloodline. We had a Black Liberation Army. We still have a Black Liberation Army. Like Asada said, until African people, new African people in America or on this globe free, there will always be a Black Liberation Army. The time will come when we will seize the time. Don't rush it. Don't be reactionary. Don't rush it. Revolutionaries are scientific in their methods of rebellion. And oppressed people have to see that. Oppressed people follow when it makes common sense, when it's logical. Or African people rebel when the time is the time to seize the rebellion. That's been happening throughout history, through the whole chronology of slave rebellions, through the whole chronology of revolutions, African revolutions. It's always a time to seize the time. That time hasn't come yet because we're still in the moment of developing. It's coming. Don't rush it. We're not reactionaries. A Black Liberation Army will spring very soon. You can count on that because the national oppression will not stop. The national oppression will not stop. A Black Liberation Army will rise to the occasion because the Black Liberation Army is still alive today. Period. Clandestine work has to be reviewed. We have to go back and look at the clandestine work because we had clandestine work. We had clandestine guerrilla warfare on this empire's soil. Clandestine scientific methods have to be reviewed. We have to go back. Sankofa, we have to go back and fetch our clandestine guerrilla tactics and scientific methods to rebellion. It's coming. It's coming in the name of people like Laura Nelson who hung by the rope. It's coming. Scientific methods of rebellion. It's coming. Hold on tight. It's coming. It won't be televised though. The revolution won't be televised. Period. I'm going to sign off on that note. I might be back later on or either tomorrow to talk about something that's more important that's coming up on May 30th and to go back and look at a new African rebellion that took place in this month also. So I might be back this evening with another topic that I want to touch on. But until then, think about this, people. We need an African Union. We need an African court. We need an African global organization that's going to hold the United States of America and all crooked dictator governments accountable for the brutal genocide murder of African people, no matter where we be on this planet. Until we get that, we're going to have to go into self-defense mode. You have to go into self-defense mode, man. Because like I stated, you have to be a loyal enemy, African people. You have to be a loyal enemy. That's the best loyalty, is being a loyal enemy. Be a loyal enemy, African people, because your enemies have more faith in what you can do than what you can do. Period. Your historical enemies have more faith in what you can do than you do. Be a loyal enemy, Africans. Be a loyal enemy to death. Free the land by any means necessary. Haki Kweli Shakur, man, a.k.a. Ike Chukwu. Free the land.